Welcome, Hands-On Apologetics, everybody. I'm Gary Michuta. You have entered into the Virgin Most Powerful Apologetics Dojo. Hands-On Apologetics, and let's talk about welcoming non-Catholics to the church, and specifically Protestants. Should we treat Protestants all the same? Should we assume that because they belong to a certain church that they believe everything that that church teaches? You know, what assumptions do we carry on? What should we do? Well, to help us work through that maze of questions, we have Master Apologist Matt Swaim joining us. Matt grew up in a strong Christian family, attended the United Methodist, Nazarene, and Free Methodist congregations, and while he's studying media communications at Ashbury College, he discovered G.K. Chesterton, and at first he became kind of curious about Catholicism. Eventually he was convicted and joined it. Matt worked in Catholic radio for nearly a decade before joining the Coming Home Network staff in 2016, where he plays a primary role of working with coordinating and promoting new videos, web, and other content for all the great material at the Coming Home Network's mission. And by the way, like I said at the beginning of the show, I'm into really good, solid, free resources. Well, this is one of those great resources. It's chnetwork.org. Matt Swaim, welcome to Hands-On Apologetics. Yeah, so you're a convert yourself, and you
Correct.
work for Coming Home Network, which deals with largely the pastors looking at, considering Catholicism. And I'm sure you deal with a lot of laity as well, right?
Oh, tons. As a matter of fact, that's the bulk of our work. Now, the pastors that come in require more help, obviously, so
sure.
They take a disproportionate amount of time to work with because there's just so many connected issues with their stories. But even for a lay person who's exploring the Catholic Church, it's not as simple as them saying, I believe, okay, let's do this. It's never that simple.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, conversions, there's often a lot of hurdles, not just propositions of faith, but practice, occupations, family life. There's a whole bunch of issues that go into conversion.
Oh, there are. For instance, if you're part of a church where your entire social network was, and you're going to essentially, in their eyes, betray that social network. I remember for my family, we were going to a church in Ohio, and there was not a full-on church split, but a controversy that was big enough to where there was enough social discord that my family just moved. We literally found a job in another state to get away from the church drama because all of our social network was invested in the church. And back then, Gary, that was the 90s, so social network didn't mean, Facebook.
Right. Unfriending people on Facebook, right?
Right. You just unfriended them during the sign of peace, right? You're like, sorry, not shaking that guy's hand.
Yeah, that's the ultimate unfriending, especially ecclesiastical unfriending.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so there's lots of issues, and you guys do such a great job there. And kudos on the website, chnetwork.org, because I use that a lot just because it's such a great database, because you get to hear people's journeys of faith from different perspectives, and you really get a good feel for what their beliefs were, what the worldview was, how they viewed Catholicism. Just great job.
Well, thank you. And you know what we say 100 times a day, it seems like, and that is, you want to know what Catholics believe? Ask a Catholic. In the same way, you want to know what a Methodist believes? You want to know what a Presbyterian believes? Right. Don't listen to what Gary Michuta or Matt Swaim says about what Methodists believe. Go find somebody. Well, I guess I was kind of Methodist. But go find somebody who used to believe that and have them tell you that. Or kind of find somebody who does believe that and have them tell you that. Because then you'll actually get a sense of them as something besides just a straw man that you can, make fun of on the internet.
And Matt, why is it important for Catholics to realize that not all Protestants are the same? Like, if you don't use that approach, or if you assume it is, I should say, what will happen?
Well, they'll put up the wall immediately, right? Imagine if I go to you and say, "Oh, you Catholics, you all, basically do whatever a pedophilia run organization tells you to do with your Mary worship and whatever, your walls go up immediately. I know mine do, right?
Yep,
I
right.
get on the defensive immediately. And if you take the time to just think about or listen or ask the question, it's amazing how far you can get with someone. I've had this experience, and this comes actually from a larger approach of doing apologetics by asking questions as though you care about the person on the other side, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
this is
right.
generally speaking a really good approach to apologetics. It's amazing the kind of conversations I've had with people from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints because of just asking questions like, so what's the inside of your building look like? I've never been in one,
Yeah.
and amazing what that kind of reveals by asking those questions. Because it can be easy for us, for training purposes, for us understanding what we believe more clearly, it's important for us to know why once saved, always saved ain't gonna fly. Why
Right.
sola scriptura, the Bible alone doesn't work. Why faith alone doesn't work. Why all these different pieces don't work. But if you're talking to another person, if somebody comes to me and says, well, you once saved, always saved people, I would say, hang on a second. As a person from the holiness movement who grew up Nazarene and Methodist and Free Methodist, we definitely did not believe in once saved, always saved. They had an altar call every Sunday so you could rededicate yourself because you'd backslidden for the past 6 days and you were going to go to hell because you stubbed your toe and cussed. There ain't no way you were once saved, always saved.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, very good.
And just even asking a few kind of clarifying or revealing questions lets them know that you're not putting them in this gigantic group called Protestant and lumping them in with – because here's the other thing. We think that the world is Catholics versus Protestants from the inside. Out there, it's Protestant versus Protestant versus Protestant versus Protestant in a knockdown, drag-out bloodbath over what it means to be Protestant. So if you lump those guys all in together, it's like when we built Iraq and drew a line around the Sunnis and the Shiites and everybody else and said, okay, you guys are a country now, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right. Yeah.
these are people who've been fighting for 500 years in the Protestant world. Well, longer than that in the Middle East. But in the Protestant world, Martin Luther didn't start Protestantism. He started 100 splinter groups that all fought each other. And so if you lump all those people in together, you're automatically lumping them in with someone that they disagree with profoundly.
Sure.
So you got to be careful about that.
Yeah, you're right, because that is exactly, I think, the worldview of most Catholics. It's us, and then there's them, and they're all, and them is usually the ones that have the arguments that are most easy to demolish, and you could just walk in and assume, well, this person's sola scripturist and he thinks like a fundamentalist, and boy, I can smash that down. But the person could be evangelical and kind of roll his eyes and say, what are you talking about?
It's just me and Jesus and being a good person. What are you talking about?
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
Whereas,
Exactly.
How do you know if it's just a guy who's like me and Jesus and I'm just going to grow my beard and smoke my pipe and, read Phyllis Tickle books or whatever, or you're talking to a hardcore fundamentalist Baptist who believes that, women shouldn't be allowed to speak until they're outside the church building. How do you know until you start asking the question?
Right. And that's
you really
the key.
Don't know.
That's the key. You need to be kind of like a doctor. You got to diagnose, who is their patient? What's their background? And don't assume that just because they're in a denomination that they believe exactly like that denomination.
And not only that, Gary, if there's one thing that the world of social media has taught us, it's that people really like to talk about themselves. And if you give someone that opportunity,
right.
It's amazing how people will open up. And if you don't recoil the first time they say something, then they feel a little bit more comfortable.
So, Matthew, you said that it starts with a conversation. Do you just follow wherever they want to go, or is it better to lead where you want the conversation to? Who leads in this dance?
That's a trap. That's a trap question, Gary. That is a trap question. You go where the Holy Spirit leads, Gary. I mean, but
okay.
But no, that honestly,
that's a good default answer, by the way.
It is a good default answer. But this goes back to something John was saying also, and that is that if you go in and you're like, I'm going to see a Protestant today, I'm going to go to an apologetics website and memorize how to deconstruct their call no man father perspective. And then you come at them with guns blazing on that issue. Maybe they don't actually care about that issue.
Yeah, right.
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 I mean, I never cared about that issue. I always thought that Jesus was saying, like, I mean, the same thing he says, call no man master. You know, that means I shouldn't call my teacher Mr. So-and-so. I mean, are you kidding me? Obviously, it's a metaphor. Different people are really latched on and invested in those certain arguments. And if you just go in with an argument in mind, I'm going to take this person down on this, you're probably going to miscalculate and find that they care about something very different.
Right. Yeah, John made an excellent point about, sticking to the major issues and forgetting, maybe not addressing so much the minor issues. Because I don't know how your experience is, but with me, I've noticed that sometimes when people, like, they have a huge obstacle with call no man father, that's usually just that's not the key issue for them.
That's the canary in the coal mine is what that is.
Exactly. It's like, yeah, this is kind of a defense where they'll throw all these minor things because they don't want to talk about what's really at stake.
Well, people, it's easier to see in political contexts when you see people who are upset and they'll latch on to any little thing that a politician they don't like does and say, well, this, that, or whatever. And they'll say, I mean, in the current case, it's, in a previous presidency, it was thanks Obama, right? Anything that goes wrong in the world, thanks Obama. In this case, it's Trump derangement syndrome or whatever. You could pick any issue you want to and be like, well, the Catholic Church is stupid because blah, blah, blah. And you can pick any issue out of the air when really what the deeper issue is something completely different. It's an issue about your orientation towards truth and whether you believe that, a lot of times it's whether you believe that the church is visible or invisible, right? Or whether you believe that history matters or doesn't matter. There was an interesting article on Christianity Today just this week. It was by one of their editors who's like, it's kind of a bummer that evangelicals have not really done baptism and communion very well because Jesus commanded these things. And just the different threads that went on in the comment with 100 different perspectives on that question alone. You got to know what's at the roots of these things before you start tacking on to one little issue.
Yeah, which is why it's so important to know where that person stands and just don't assume.
Right.
You're a Baptist, so you believe X, or you're a Presbyterian, you believe Y.
Yeah. There's a reason that there's a bunch of different kinds of Baptist church because they disagreed so badly that they split up and rejected. They did what Martin Luther did to the Catholic Church to their own denomination.
Right.
I mean, that's hard for us to get our minds around.
Yeah, very good. So ultimately, I think you shouldn't treat people like projects, and we've said that dozens of times before. Never just go after somebody just because I'm going to win somebody for Christ, and here's a candidate X and then candidate Y and so on. But
it's like something Mary Kay right there.
Yeah, you need to develop a rapport. You need to listen. You need to hear their story. Like you said, everybody likes to hear the story. But ultimately, I think let me know if you agree with this, but isn't the ultimate goal is to find out, like, what is that key issue? What is the most important obstacle, that is preventing you from embracing the fullness of Christ and His church?
Yeah, and this is why I think it's so good to have these conversion stories, because it gives you so many different examples of the way that grace works on the human heart and the way that Holy Spirit speaks to individual people. Because the Holy Spirit doesn't just say, all right, world, I'm the Holy Spirit. Whoever's interested, I'm over here. The Holy Spirit speaks deeply to each individual person. It's the same Holy Spirit. Truth is one. But, you can, as John mentioned, I'm from Kentucky. Just because you're from Kentucky and you do, you like fishing and drink Ale 81 and do all these other things that Kentucky people do, every Kentuckian is an individual, right? There's no one Kentuckian. We can't stereotype all people in Kentucky as the same kind of thing. You can't stereotype all Protestants of one stripe. And the other thing, too, is that if we're going to talk about what communion is, what the Eucharist is, Jesus Christ, fully present in the Eucharist, who is, with us through time and around the world in the Blessed Sacrament, still humbles himself to meet each one of us individually in Holy Communion.
Right.
And so if we use that as our starting point for how we're going to think about how we're going to reach someone with the Lord, let's think about how Jesus reaches us. It is individually as part of the church, but in the context of the church, he gets you, Gary, every time you go up to communion and pauses for you. And if we would take that approach to other people, I think it would revolutionize our evangelization.
Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.